What's up, everyone, and welcome to Method in the Madness. This is the podcast that not only delves deep into design and creativity, but also leadership, productivity, and personal development too. And before we kick off with the proper episodes of the show, I thought I would just kind of kick off the podcast with a brief intro episode to chat about a few different things. First one being, why have I decided to do a podcast in the first place? Second one being what I hope this podcast will be as, hopefully become in the future. And then I thought it would be worth talking about some of the things that this podcast is likely not to be. So, kicking off with the first one, why have I decided to do a podcast? And the very short answer to this question is that I listen to a lot of podcasts that all kind of touch on these areas, but never kind of merge them together. And I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and the ones that I tend to kind of get hooked on are the ones that are just more what you see is what you get, quite candid, honest conversations, and are not too polished. And in the design and creative space, I felt that we were kind of missing that, especially in Scotland, not even, the UK. So that is one reason why I wanted to start the podcast. Another reason is that I've been working in the creative industry for over 10 years now, and I've been super fortunate to work and partner and collaborate and work for a whole bunch of really interesting people. And I really kind of want to basically use this podcast as a platform to share their stories. There are some really interesting people out there that I've worked with that all have an interesting story and all, a journey to their career or why they do what they do or the effect their work has had on other people. And I want to basically use this podcast to share those stories, as well as draw from them any kind of insights, strategies, and methodologies that they use that the people listening can maybe use in their own life and their own work. And luckily for yourselves, it's not just going to be me and a microphone. Each episode I will have a different guest on to chat about, obviously what they do, but more importantly, how they do it and why they do it. And we have a pretty diverse range of guests coming on. It's not just going to be designers and creatives, there's going to be business owners and all sorts. So keep your eyes and ears peeled and, you'll no doubt enjoy the guests that are kind of coming on. Another reason is that I am hugely passionate about productivity, personal development, and the power of a, positive mental attitude, as cheesy as that sounds, mainly because I've kind of experienced it firsthand, the effect it can have on your life. About 10 years ago, following my graduation, I was stuck in a bit of a rut, and I was kind of hating where I was mentally and physically in terms of like location in the city I was in. I was hating my first job in the design industry, and I was worried that I'd kind of made a bit of a wrong move career choice wise, and the 4 years at uni was going to be completely worthless. And more importantly, my weight had completely kind of spiraled out of control over the course of university. This is something that's kind of haunted me my whole life in terms of my weight, but over the course of university, it just kind of got completely out of control, as you can imagine, with the things you get up to as a student. But it always made me miserable, and I'd never done anything about it. So with both of those things annoying the hell out of me, I decided to take some pretty severe action. So I quit my job and I moved my life down to Edinburgh. And in the interim, I also lost close to 45 kilograms, all within the same year. And there's a little bit more about this on the website if you're interested, as well as quite an amusing fat boy to slim before and after photo if that's something that you're interested in. So just head over to the website, which is the mitmpodcast.com, to find out more. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is the more I read about creative leadership as well as productivity and personal development, the more I could kind of see the principles, rituals, and habits that you kind of develop overlapping. Like a lot of them, there's tons of stuff in common. Whenever you hear about some of the great minds and the great thinkers in the world, you don't really tend to speak about the day-to-day tasks that are super specific to their job. It's a series of principles that are kind of almost applicable to anyone. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's things that are very applicable to a certain person's job, but what I find is that they more talk about things like leadership, how they empower a team, how they help people progress in their development. You usually hear them talking about why they do it, what's their purpose, what's their philosophy, as well as how they do it. All of them tend to have super positive rituals, habits, or patterns or strategies on how they actually execute their work. And not only is this something that I'm fascinated by, but something that I thought we needed more of in the kind of creative podcast space, especially here in the UK. So hence why I'm here speaking into a microphone, and hopefully that sums up why I started the show. So with that said, let's move on to number 2, which was what I hope this podcast will be. And if you know me, you'll know that I'm a pretty forthright, loud, honest person, and I kind of want this podcast to be a bit the same. We'll be having very real, honest, forthright discussions about the design and creativity industry, but also leadership, productivity, personal development, like I mentioned. I also want to kind of learn about some of the processes, strategies, and methodologies from a broad range of great creative thinkers. We're going to be having designers, entrepreneurs, inventors, photographers, business owners. I'm even hoping to get a couple of athletes on as well, which would be really cool. And hopefully, every now and then, I'll try and unravel some of the things I've learned in my career as well, if, I can kind of spend time, unpicking those things. So that being said as well, if you guys have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them on the podcast. Please just email the podcast on methodinthemadnesspodcast@gmail.com or get in touch through the contact form on the website as well. And my hope in all of this and doing the podcast is not only will you become a better, more well-rounded creative thinker or leader, but it might also have a positive influence in other areas of your life like it has with me, and basically just make you an all-round better human being. And last but not least, here are some of the things that the podcast is definitely not going to be. First things first, this is all completely brand new to me, so it's unlikely to be a super slick operation. But I kind of want it that way. As creatives, we're prone to a bit of ego stroking, and this is not what this show is going to be about. There will be times where it's serious, there will be times where it's silly, there's going to be times where there's probably a bit of a debate going on about a certain topic, but I always want it to be kind of honest and unfiltered. It's also going to be as frequent as possible, meaning I'm hoping to kind of aim for at least 2 podcasts a month. But, sometimes life gets in the way, and I'm also completely reliant on my guest schedules as well, so it's completely up to their availability also. And lastly, there's definitely going to be things I mess up. Editing audio, editing a podcast, speaking into a microphone, setting all this kind of stuff up is completely brand new to me. I've never done this before, nor do I have any experience doing it, so there's definitely going to be things I'm going to fuck up from time to time while I learn the ropes, so please bear with me while I learn all this new podcast stuff. And with all that said, I'm really interested to hear what you think. Please head over to the website, themitmpodcast.com, and over there you can find out a bit more about the show. You can get all the show notes for each episode and find out how you can also personally support the show. You can also follow us and DM me on Twitter at the MITM Podcast, and you can also find us on LinkedIn by searching just for the podcast name, Method in the Madness. If you guys have any questions or feedback, positive or negative, I'd love to kind of hear about it so I can keep improving the show. Just, either DM me on there or email me through the website. And of course, you can also find the podcast on a variety of different platforms, mainly Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, TuneIn. I'll try and get it up on more in due course. Also, while you're there, please hit the subscribe button. That will make sure that you get notified when the next episode goes up. And while you're there, please leave a review. Reviews help bring other people into the podcast because they can see the kind of ratings and stuff, which is awesome, obviously. But it would also be great to kind of find out what everyone thinks, whether it's good or bad. But please be gentle. But with all that said, that's it from me here. So massive thank you for listening, and I hope you really enjoy the episodes that are coming up, and I hope you find some method in the madness.